Begin with a gripping hook. You know that feeling when someone doesn't just disagree. They tear you down until the room feels like it's closing in on you. That was me, standing at the podium at that tech summit, the audience's eyes burning into my skin, the phrase, "You're an embarrassment," echoing like a cold wind through a glass jar. I had just presented my radical idea, using biometric data to decode emotions and finally give people a language for their inner storms. The room erupted in gasps, then laughter. Cold science, they called it. Dehumanizing, they whispered. I left the stage clutching my notebook, the ink smudged on the page of my future, and I could hear my own family's voice still ringing in my ears. "You'll never make it," they'd said years ago. "You're just a dreamer with a computer in his head." That night, I walked out of the convention center with my head down, but inside a fire lit itself. I wasn't broken, I was summoned. The painful departure and relentless pursuit, I drove back to the two-story house, where my parents still kept the old family album on the mantel. My mother's voice, warm as always, cut through the radio. "We need you home." I lied, said I'd be back for dinner, and I never looked back. The next morning, I packed a single suitcase, a laptop, and a promise to myself that I would prove them wrong, not by shouting louder, but by building something so undeniable it would rewrite the narrative we'd all been living. For months, I lived in a cramped attic, coffee spilling onto my keyboard, days blurting into nights. I turned my grief into code, my humiliation into hypothesis. I taught myself to read heartbeats, to interpret the micro wrinkles of a smile, to let a tiny spike in cortisol guide an algorithm that could whisper to a mind in distress. Colleagues called me the empathy coder, a joke at first, then a label I wore proudly. The ridicule I'd faced from strangers became fuel. The same ridicule I'd heard from my family was now a distant echo behind me. I spent years stumbling. My first prototype, Heart Speak, misread joy as anxiety, sending frantic alerts to hospitals that never came. Funding fell through, investors called me a risky dreamer, and my phone screen showed no data. Yet I kept at it. I built a community of like-minded outsiders, a network of dreamers who understood that true innovation lives in the spaces where people think you're too cold to exist. I started evenings at a local community garden, letting strangers place their hands on sensors, watching their pulse synchronize with the soil, and I learned something profound. Empathy isn't a feeling you hide behind a screen. It's a pulse you can hear if you listen. The ARDUUS ascension and profound triumph, the breakthrough came when I paired my algorithm with a simple, low-cost wearable, a ring that measured skin conductance, breath rate, and temperature. I released a pilot in a small town called Willow Creek, a place that had been left barren by industrial runoff and economic despair. The town's residents, many of them skeptical, wore the rings while they worked the fields. My system learned to predict when a farmer's stress spiked before a storm, prompting him to shut off irrigation, saving the crops. It detected when a teenager's anxiety peaked, sending a gentle reminder to breathe. And within weeks, the local clinic reported a 40% drop in panic attacks. The results didn't stay hidden. A viral documentary captured a farmer's daughter, tears streaming down her face as the algorithm whispered, "You're not alone." And she hugged her father, finally understanding his silent worry. The media called it the miracle ring. Investors rushed in, not for the profit, but because they saw a future where mental health was no longer a silent battle. My company, now called Empathy Labs, expanded beyond rings. We built sensors that monitored entire ecosystems, soil health, plant stress, even the collective mood of a community. We transformed Willow Creek's wasteland into a thriving agroforestry hub, planting trees that absorbed carbon, restored water tables, and turned barren hills into gardens that fed hundreds. The transformation didn't stop at the town. We licensed our technology to schools, prisons, hospitals, and remote villages. Mothers could place a sensor on their child's cradle and receive a real-time alert if something was wrong. Veterans could wear the ring during therapy sessions, and watched their brain patterns soften as they shared stories. The cold science that once drew gasps now filled homes with calm, turning the very emotions people feared to feel into data they could act upon. The cathartic return and poetic justice 2 years after I left, I flew back to the family house for my mother's 70th birthday. The house had changed. An entire greenhouse now glowed behind the kitchen window, its glass walls alive with potted herbs and seedlings. My father stood at the front door, his hands calloused from years of manual labor, now gently holding a small potted plant I'd given him. When I stepped inside, the whole family gathered around the coffee table, staring at a tablet that had been waiting for me. It was a live feed from Willow Creek, a time lapse of the barren hills turning into forests, the fields flourishing, the community thriving. I watched as a child, my cousin, the one who once called me the computer guy with a smirk, planted a sapling, his hands trembling with pride. I turned the camera to my parents' faces. Their eyes widened, then softened. My mother's voice cracked as she spoke. I never imagined we'd see this. My father, after years of silence, added, "We were wrong, son. We were so scared you'd lose yourself, and you found us through your work." They never used the word apology, but the weight of those moments hung in the air like the scent of fresh soil after rain. The scene that still haunts me to this day is the night I placed the first sensor on my mother's wrist. She was asleep, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest captured by the device. The algorithm registered a rare dip in her heart rate variability, an indicator of early-stage anxiety that I didn't know she'd been carrying. I sent a gentle notification to her phone. "Mom, you're not alone. We've got you." She woke, looked at the ring on her wrist, and smiled. "You made me a cyborg," she laughed, "but you made me feel human again." In that moment, the ledger of karma balanced. The derision I'd endured became the fuel for a revolution that touched millions. And my family, once the harshest critics, became the first witnesses to a triumph they'd been too blind to imagine. The humiliation of the summit turned into a foundation. The family's doubt turned into hope. Now, when I walk into that same kitchen, I see my parents not as judges, but as partners in the story I'm still writing. Their laughter fills the room, the greenhouse hums with life, and I know that every setback, every cold science jab, was simply a stepping stone toward a world where empathy isn't a feeling we hide behind screens. It's a pulse we all share. The story ends not with a final applause, but with the simple promise I make to myself each day. Keep listening, keep building, keep proving that the most human thing we can do is love the people who once tried to break us.